Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome to my Saturday Hodgepodge. If you've read the title card, you already know that this one is not going to be about books. This is going to be about the political situation the United States finds itself in thanks to President Donald Trump at the current time. So if you don't want to hear me talk about politics, you probably already unsubscribed to my channel, but feel free not to watch this because you know, I've said on this channel and I say on my Twitter feed all the time that I oftentimes feel relatively helpless about what to do with the current political situation in the United States. And one of the things I've resolved to do is use whatever social media presence I have, whatever small it may be, to voice my opinion, to put my ideas out there, and to make clear where I stand on these issues. So the title card says, I believe, the election, the coup, and this is who we are until we prove differently. So let me talk about all three of those things. So obviously, for reasons primarily having to do with President Trump's unwillingness to embrace the fact that democracy actually exists in the United States of America, we had a very contentious, contested, I guess, election, which really was over on November the 3rd. All voting was done by November the 3rd. It did take a lot longer to count than it normally does, for the simple reason that during the pandemic, a lot of states had extended their mail-in voting, and mail-in votes have to actually be processed by hand. The ballot has to be checked, signatures have to be checked, which, by the way, they were checked. They then have to be run through a machine and the votes collected. That takes time. Additionally, Republican legislatures in 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, told election workers they couldn't begin processing mail-in ballots until the day of the election. This is why a lot of votes that were Biden votes came in the middle of the night, because Trump had openly talked about mail-in voting not being secure, which more or less encouraged his people to be in-person voters on Election Day, whereas Biden embraced the concept of mail-in voting. So a lot of Biden's voters mailed their votes in. There's no mystery to that. There's no conspiracy in that. The president created that situation. He could have told his voters to mail in their votes. He chose not to. So that's, one reason why the voting was slow, and it is also one of the sources of the conspiracy. But eventually what has happened is that all the states have come to the conclusion, or have certified their votes. They certified their votes. That those vote certifications indicated that Joe Biden should receive 306 electoral college votes, which he did, because the states certified their slates of electors. Notice that these states are not all Democratic states. They're not all democratically controlled states. Some of those states have Republican governments and Republican election officials, and yet they still certified these election results as being authentic and valid because they were. And therefore, what happened on Wednesday, January the 6th, the official counting of the Electoral College vote by a joint session of both the House and the Senate should have been purely ceremonial. But it wasn't, because President Trump has been whining about how he was cheated out of the election and how he actually won by a landslide for most of the days since it became clear that Joe Biden was going to be elected. And so we've seen challenges to election results in all kinds of states. Georgia conducted 2 recounts, one by hand and one machine recount. By the way, a recount and an audit are the same thing. They are. So one of the central contentions, if you've heard that ridiculous and illegal call that President Trump made to the Georgia Secretary of State, one of his contentions was that ballots were secretly hidden away and pulled out from under a table and run through the machine multiple times. If that had happened, the hand recount would have caught this. It would have shown a major discrepancy in vote totals. That did not happen. One of the things that Trump talked about in Georgia is how they didn't have signature verification. They did. Each signature on a mail-in ballot was verified twice, and to try to make him happy, they authenticated signatures again in Cobb County, one of the counties that he lost, and they found out that the signature verification was 99.9% accurate. This stopped President Trump from claiming that massive voter fraud and trying to pressure Republican state officials in Georgia into finding votes to make him president? No, he did not. Trump is not interested in democracy. He's not interested in fair elections. One of the other states the other state where there's a Republican governor and Republican state officials is Arizona. And his people claimed all kinds of things, including still sticking with this idea that Sharpie markers were used and those votes didn't count and they did it on purpose. That has been debunked by the state of Arizona. So here's the thing. There are all these conspiracies about how laws were changed to keep Trump from winning and how all these election results were prejudiced and how the election was stolen. All of those claims had been debunked. No matter what you've heard about hearings, which weren't really hearings because you can't have a hearing in a hotel room lobby and it be official, or hearings in which only certain people showed up and only certain witnesses were invited to testify and give their testimony. No matter what you've heard about all these affidavits, none of that proves any kind of conspiracy. None of it proves fraud. And if it did, the place where that would have been worked out was in court. Trump's lawyers and people on Trump's side took the election officials and election results to court at least 61 times. And judges at the local level, judges at the state level, judges at the federal level, and judges in the Supreme Court all ruled that those cases were without merit. Either because they didn't have standing to sue, which is a big deal. You have to be able to prove harm and how you were harmed to be able to have a lawsuit. Otherwise, I could just sue, Amazon for not giving me any money. And second, a lot of those cases, at least 14 attempts, and at least 14 occasions, the merits of the case, the actual evidence was actually reviewed, including by the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court threw out that ridiculous case brought by, the Attorney General of the state of Texas, who, by the way, is under indictment right now and under FBI investigation for criminal activity, when they threw that out, they said, the two most conservative justices, Thomas and Scalia, said that while we think this case should have been heard by the Supreme Court, we would have rejected it on the merits. They looked at the evidence and they threw it out. Judges appointed by Trump looked at the evidence and they threw the cases out. Republican state judges elected who were Republicans threw the cases out. Trump had his chance. He was able to make his case, just like you and I have a chance to do, and he lost his cases. There is no provision in the Constitution which allows Congress to set up a commission to review election results by states, unless there is a dispute, perhaps, and more than one set of electors is sent to Congress, which it wasn't. Each state only sent one slate of electors to Congress. And we knew that was going to happen. This election wasn't stolen, but there was an attempted coup. There was an attempt to overthrow the United States government and to prevent Joe Biden from becoming president and to keep President Trump president for 4 more years. That's what it was. Now, does that mean that I believe President Trump was involved in conspiracy to create this, to carry out a coup and to overthrow the United States government to become a dictator? I'm not going to say that because that sounds like conspiracy theories and I don't go in for those. So let me just tell you what we do know. Trump, long before January the 6th, started talking about stopping the steal and taking our country back. This is his rhetoric. That the election had been stolen, our democracy had been perverted, that our country was being taken away from us because of the results of a fair and open election, which I just talked about, and I can go into more detail in the comment section if you want to have an argument about it. I will be happy to. So he claims that an election that was fair and open was actually rigged against him, and therefore he's encouraging his followers to stop the steal, to take the country back. This is his rhetoric. As it becomes clear that the Supreme Court isn't going to keep him in office, isn't going to subvert the Constitution and keep him in office, and the states are not going to subvert the Constitution and keep him in office, he then decides that he's going to invite all of his supporters to come to Washington, D.C. on January the 6th to stop the steal. That's his rhetoric. He called on his supporters to come to Washington, D.C. to stop the steal, to take their country back. There was a rally called a Save America rally on January the 6th in the morning, in which Mike Flynn, a known liar to the FBI and a traitor, George Papadopoulos, a known liar to the FBI and a traitor to the United States of America, both gave speeches encouraging the crowd that gathered there to fight, to stop the steal, to save America, to take their country back. Representative Mo Brooks, a member of Congress, showed up and said it was time to kick ass and take names to an angry crowd of Trump supporters. Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., showed up and talked about people willing to fight for America and for President Trump. And then President Trump showed up and repeated all this language about stopping the steal and about taking America back. And then he ordered his followers to march to the Capitol. Now, of course, being a liar and a coward, he said, I'll go with you, and we'll march to the Capitol. He didn't. He ran away and hid in the White House. But his followers definitely went. And then we saw the events that unfolded. There wasn't enough police presence at the Capitol to protect the Capitol. Hopefully there'll be an investigation to find out why. And his followers then were able to break into the Capitol to do property damage. Now, some of the terrorists who broke into the Capitol probably had no idea that there were people among them, and this is now proven photographically, there were people among them who were part of extremist groups who had plans that went beyond just causing mayhem and plans that went beyond just maybe stopping the Electoral College vote count, which, by the way, is terrorism and a coup. There may, it's possible, and I imagine that a lot of people that went along didn't know everything was going to happen, but we now know that there were people in that group who knew exactly what they were doing. There were people who were there who were armed, who were wearing Kevlar vests, who had guns, who had prepared Molotov cocktails. We know that explosive devices were left outside the RNC headquarters and the DNC headquarters on Capitol Hill. We have pictures of armed men in the House or Senate chambers with zip tie, flex cuffs, so they could take hostages. We know they went looking for Vice President Pence. Several people have videotaped themselves saying they were looking for Vice President Pence so they could kill him. They went to Nancy Pelosi's office, the Speaker of the House. The person who is, depending on how you count, second or third in line to the presidency. They went looking for her specifically. They had to rush the Vice President and the Speaker of the House out of the House chamber, because the crowd and the mob and the terrorists were outside. They barricaded themselves in. Capitol Hill policemen drew their guns in an attempt to protect members of Congress, the Vice President, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives from the mob. And when a member of the mob terrorist group actually broke through into this area where, it was the responsibility of the police to protect our elected officials, one of them was shot and killed. She was a terrorist. We shoot and kill terrorists. If you scale the fence at the White House, somebody's going to shoot you. If you break through the window and attempt to get into a barricaded and secure location in the United States Capitol, somebody's going to shoot you. In the process of all this going on, these terrorists killed a member of the Capitol Hill Police Force, of the Capitol Police Department. They killed an American policeman. And whose orders were they following? And who had incited this crowd? And what were they trying to do? They erected a scaffold with a noose on the grounds of the Capitol. Men went inside with zip-tie handcuffs to kidnap members of the United States government because of the president's rhetoric, because of the president's incitement, because of the incitement of people like Mo Brooks, because of the incitement of people like Donald Trump Jr., because of the incitement of people like George Papadopoulos. They went there for that purpose. They had prepared and planned this. There are records on, message boards that cater to and are dominated by these white supremacist, far-right militia-type groups in which they planned this. They organized it to do exactly this. It was a coup attempt. Whether everybody who went into the Capitol or not was involved, was aware of it or not, it was an attempted coup. But a lot of those people who went in came out bragging about how they'd stopped the Electoral College vote. In other words, they were bragging about stopping democracy in the United States of America. and they posted their pictures on social media, and they videoed themselves doing it, and they all should go to jail. Every single one of them. And the people who came in with weapons and zip ties should be classified as terrorists, and they should be tried as terrorists because they are terrorists. And the President of the United States who incited this, who encouraged this, who gave a wink and a nod, and who ordered them to go to the Capitol should not be president right now. Right now, he should have been removed from office. If you're seeing this on Saturday and he's still in office, we are not doing the right thing. No president in the history of the United States has incited a mob to try to overthrow the United States government except Donald J. Trump. His impeachment should have begun as soon as they got back to work at noon yesterday. Yesterday would have been Thursday. I filmed these on Friday. That should have already taken place. By the way, Trump and the mob also got complicit support from Senators Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley. These two men are smart. They went to like Harvard and Yale Law School. They know the law. They knew there was no election fraud. And yet they acted like they believed there was, which gave legitimacy to what Trump was talking about, gave legitimacy to this idea that the election had been stolen. And they knew what they were doing, and they did it for cynical political reasons because they hoped to tap into that same group of Trump supporters who Trump fired up and sent to the Capitol. That's how cynical those two men are. They should be censured, and they should be removed from the United States Senate. Hell, it's Texas and Missouri. We're going to elect another Republican. But those two men have no business in the United States Senate. Mo Brooks has no business in the House of Representatives. He helped incite a mob that attacked the United States Capitol, and a policeman died. And high-ranking officials of the United States government were almost kidnapped by terrorists. Domestic white supremacist terrorists. That's what happened on Wednesday. And the fact that Donald Trump is still president of the United States right now is a failure of our constitutional system. He should be out of office as we speak. He should not have power. Now, I know he recorded a message which he put back on his Twitter page after his suspension was over. We talked about healing and a smooth transition. That was bullshit. He's already back on Twitter talking about how the 75 million patriots, are not going to be ignored. And if you think there's not going to be trouble on Inauguration Day, January the 20th, I'm afraid you're living in a fantasy land. Unless the government gets very proactive about stopping and planning for the worst is going to happen again. Because the same people who broke into the Capitol, those same right-wing terrorists who broke into the Capitol have already promised to come back with guns and to do a lot worse on Inauguration Day. That's where we are. So I've seen a number of people, and unfortunately, even President Biden, imply that this is not who we are. This is who we are. Until we prove that this isn't us, this is who we are. And that's going to take Democrats and Republicans and liberals and conservatives and whatever the hell else you talked about yourself being. This is who we are until we prove it's not. Trump did not create these people. He tapped into these people. He encouraged these people. He had the government and the FBI look the other way at what the activities of these people, but he didn't create them. They've been there. They were there when Timothy McVeigh exploded that bomb outside the Oklahoma City Federal Building. They've been there. And they've been training for this for a long time. And Trump essentially activated them. Whether he intended it or not, his followers attempted a coup to take over the United States government on Wednesday. Now ask yourself this. If they had succeeded in capturing Vice President Pence and Nancy Pelosi and harming members of the United States government, with the effect being that perhaps Trump could stay in power, can you honestly tell me that you're sure Donald Trump would have said that was wrong? It sent in the National Guard to stop them and prosecute people. He would not. The only reason why he's talking about how he's against the violence and stopping that thing, stopping coup and going after all these people is because it failed. Additionally, do not discount the fact that race is a major motivating factor in the behavior of Trump supporters and in Trump's rhetoric. Notice, Trump talked about fraud. He talked about election stealing only in counties and districts with a large African American population. That fact is not lost on white supremacist terrorists. The coup we saw yesterday on Wednesday was an attempted coup by white supremacists to take back the country because they felt like it was slipping away because Trump had lost. That's what that was. And as President Biden pointed out, if the protest had been a Black Lives Matter protest, we would have seen a much larger police presence, because that's already happened. We would have seen a much more vigorous response if they came anywhere near the Capitol. That is straight racism, to have a two-tiered system in which you treat one group of protesters who are actually terrorists one way because they're white, and another group of protesters who are not terrorists another way because they're black. That is straight racism. That is who we are until we prove we're not. I attempted not to get too fired up. I failed. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and as always, thank you for watching.